Welcome back, everyone, here to East Texas Now. We are now going to go ahead and jump in here to a different topic this morning and talk about the 2026 primary elections for Texas that's coming up on March the 3rd, with early voting starting February the 17th. On the ballot, there are many statewide seats, including governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, land commissioner, agricultural commissioner, comptroller, and more. Republicans and Democrats will also choose candidates for congressional and legislative offices, the State Board of Education, and judicial seats. Today we're talking with Courtney Head, who is running for the Democratic nomination for lieutenant governor. Let's go ahead and bring in Ms. Head this morning to kind of break down why she is running. Good morning, Ms. Head.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. So let's kind of dive in here. Why are you running?
Yes, so I am, an average Texan. I grew up here. I'm a mom, a wife, a worker. And I think, like many of us in Texas, we're very frustrated with the political culture and climate here. And I live by that quote, if to be the change you want to see in the world. And so it really motivated me to put my name forward, and to provide an option for the people of Texas to have a young, progressive leader in charge of the Texas Senate.
Okay. Well, let's talk about your background. You were born into a military family in Honolulu. What was life growing up as a military brat?
It was very small time. So my father was not career military. He was in for, I think, about 8 years. And so much of that time I was before I was even born. So I was pretty young. And my parents actually split when I was about a year old, I believe. And my mother moved back home to San Antonio, where she grew up, and raised me alongside the help of her parents, my grandparents. But I do come from a military family. Besides my father serving, my grandfather, my uncle also served as well. And so military culture is very big. Obviously, here in San Antonio, it's a very huge part of our community. And I have a lot of respect for our military service members. But as far as experiencing hopping around, I didn't have that exposure um, at at that time.
Well, I know you kind of touched on San Antonio. You moved to San Antonio with your mother and grew up in the city, like you touched on just now. Tell us about that life in your hometown and, in your view, what makes San Antonio special to you.
Absolutely. San Antonio is actually a very beautiful place to grow up. It's relatively safe, and there's a lot to do. And I think that growing up in San Antonio, you have a huge respect for the Mexican culture. It's very integrated. I think that in other areas of Texas, you don't really have that exposure, but in San Antonio, you grow up with like the Chicana lifestyle, and you have these exposures to different cultures. You're hearing Spanish constantly. And I think that that has guided my principles as far as serving all Texans, because I'm sure that we're a minority majority state here. And I have a huge respect for the Mexican culture and all of the individuals who, bring that perspective. I think that San Antonio was great. It's very central in Texas. So, it has a lot of different ability to travel around, and being central, you have the opportunity to hop over to Austin, Houston. It's a really great location as far as growing up. But I actually grew up on the north side of the city, so it's kind of on the outskirts. And having some land to run around on is so meaningful. I grew up on my parents' property, so they had about 5.5 acres, and I was able to just run around and kind of create my own little space and world out there, which was such a blessing. So I really enjoyed growing up in San Antonio, and I really appreciate the multiculturalism that's available.
Okay, well, let's kind of maneuver on over to talk more about your career. On your website, it describes yourself as a legal and compliance profession and policy leader. What does a day at work look like for you?
Yes, so I'm head of legal management contracting operations for a software company that services primarily utilities and airlines here in the United States. And my average day is, drafting internal and external policies, prioritizing which contracts, with whether that be with vendors, clients, you name it, are getting prioritized, managing our legal operations, and ensuring that our systems and processes for those operations are streamlined, scalable, and have the ability to be innovated. And so my day to day is essentially, head of legal operations for this company and ensuring that we are abiding by not just our internal policies but also government policies and other regulations.
Okay. Well, let's now hear about what drew you to run for office. Kind of a three-part question here. In 2013, you interned for the district office for Congressman Joaquin Castro. What inspired you to take this internship? What did you learn at your time at his office, and how did it shape your view of public office for representative government?
Absolutely. So I took that internship, and it was my first exposure to public service. And I really appreciated being at the location in the San Antonio office, district office, because there I was working day in and day out directly with the constituents here in the city. And that exposure just taught me how, one, it can be very challenging for citizens to access public services, get the appropriate needs met right from the state. And also, I think that what most people want and what I learned from that is they want to be heard, they want to be listened to. And that experience taught me to sit down and listen and let people tell their story because it's essential to being able to better serve them.
All right. Well, let's delve into your platform now. You support legal recreational marijuana. You say it's more than personal freedom. Explain what you mean here.
Yes. So it's not just about having the personal liberty, right, to as an adult to enjoy in cannabis or to not, but it's also about boosting Texas' economy. For over a decade now, we have been losing out on billions of dollars of revenue annually simply because we have not legalized and regulated a cannabis market here. And what does that look like? That looks like Texans going to Mexico, right, to purchase cannabis and use it there. So we're not only are we losing revenue from Texans, right, but we're also losing revenue from tourism, right? That could also be contributed as well. And so I think that for me, it just seems like the logical economic choice to legalize cannabis so that we can not only have a safe and free market, right? And so, what we're also doing when we legalize is we're reducing the black market. When adults have an option to go to a legal, um, you know, a legal purchaser, they're not going to be seeking it out from the guy on the street, right? So it closes black markets, it boosts our revenue, and it allows people to have the personal freedom of choice.
Well, staying on this same topic here, on your website, you claim legal and regulated marijuana markets could generate over $1 billion dollars in revenue for the state. Where did you get that figure, and where would you push for that money to go towards? And also, another question here, another part here. How would you work with both Democrats and Republicans in the state legislature to pass legal cannabis?
Yes. So that number, it is an estimate, but it is a pretty valid estimate based on the revenues that we see in other states like Colorado and California. And so we take when I'm calculating that number, I took the population density of Texas and the tourism population. And so when you quantify that based on our population, tourism population, you can get roughly at least a minimum. I mean, that's honestly a very low estimate. It could be even higher of $1 billion annually. And so the comparison is just by doing some sort of cross math with other states that have already regulated and have an existing market. And getting that passed, it may be challenging. However, I think that most Texans are in favor of cannabis regulation and legalization. And so, what it takes is public pressure, right? So when you're running the Senate, obviously there's going to be Republicans on the other side who may be pushing against it. I think there are some Republicans who are pro cannabis because it's a freedom. It's a freedom of choice. There's no reason we should be denying adults that ability. And so putting that public pressure on them, having their constituents come and testify, and having those representatives in the Senate, or those senators tell their constituents to their face why they're going to deny them this freedom of choice is very impactful. So we have public testimony, right? We have public pressure. I would also use media pressure as well. And being the lieutenant governor, you have direct control of the Senate. I get to say what bills are going to be on the agenda. And so therefore, they would not have a choice but to hear this bill until they get it passed. But using that public pressure is essential to getting policy passed.
Okay, now let's talk more about healthcare. On this topic of healthcare, you say too many Texans remain uninsured or underinsured. In your view, what is behind this problem and what's your plan to expand healthcare access for Texans?
Yes. So the main contributor of this is when Texas did not choose to expand Medicaid through the ACA, the Affordable Care Act. I believe this was back in 2013, 2014, 2013. And that expansion is honestly unbelievable because us as Texans, we're already paying in to this Medicaid expansion for every other state. So our taxes are already going towards this, our federal income taxes. And what happens is the federal government sends that money back, right, to expand Medicaid so that people who don't have insurance or have underinsurance can be eligible to have it at a lower rate. So expanding that is essential to making sure that people have insurance. Also, we have a very reactive healthcare system policy in Texas, which in turn costs us much more money in the long run. We're spending close to, I think, 100 and something billion on, or no, 130 million on healthcare or more, and we have such inefficient outcomes. And so when we are using these reactive policies, what happens is um, an individual who doesn't have insurance will go to the hospital. They can't pay their fees. And what the state will do, they will supplement the hospital's income and try to give them some money in order to kind of break even, get out of the red for these patients that cannot pay for their care. And so what happens from there is this reactive policy of, okay, people don't have the health insurance, hospitals are covering this, so Texas will help these hospitals. But if these individuals did have health insurance, it would reduce the overhead costs for the hospitals, and Texas would not have to supplement these these healthcare institutions. And so, having a proactive policy of having people have care would be essential to not only reducing poor healthcare outcomes, it would reduce rural hospital closures, but it would also protect our healthcare economy.
All right, now moving on to the topic of education. On education, you're opposed to the school voucher program. If elected, would you work with state legislature to repeal school vouchers, or would you be willing to work on reforming the current law?
I would absolutely be working to repeal it. I do not believe that public funds should be going to private hands. That is antithetical to our democratic government. Public money should go to public institutions, and the school voucher program, obviously, as I'm sure people have seen in the media, it's only servicing very few areas of Texas. You don't see any availability for these private school vouchers in rural communities. So it's going to disproportionately affect those that are in rural communities because those funds that should be going to their school are not going to be going there any longer.
All right. Now, on transportation, you say our state relies too heavily on cars and highways. What do you mean by that? And in your view, what are the consequences of our reliance on cars?
Yes. So, as many are aware, Texas is a big oil and gas state, and those oil and gas lobbyists have done a very good job at making sure that vehicles and vehicular transportation and freight transit is the main modus operandi, right? And because of this, we have completely stalled innovation when it comes to public transportation. I have heard my entire life about the Texas Triangle of high speed rail, and it has never come to fruition because of oil and gas lobbyists. And due to this, we are stagnating, right? The movement of not only people around Texas, but also commodities and freight. With innovations in public transportation, especially in high speed rail, not only would we be able to get, I mean, there's been tests. We can see that from Dallas to Houston, we could have a high speed rail take about 90 minutes to get to each city. Which would be incredible. This would be life changing for Texans, especially in rural communities. And what I would like to do is push that forward and push the innovation for transportation, so that we can have movement in our state. Right now, if you do not have a car in Texas, you're pretty much out of luck. And your ability to move around the state, to get a job, to take your children to school is very limited. And with proper public transportation, we can mitigate costs, right? Because with a car, we have a state law, you have to have car insurance. And by doing so, it would really open up a lot of opportunities, not just for Texas, but also for businesses and transporting their commodities.
All right. You're also in favor of several public transportation projects, expanding commuter rail between San Antonio and Austin and beyond, as you just kind of touched on, strengthening bus rapid transit. How would those projects benefit Texans in the future?
Yeah, so in when we think about Texans in the future, we as a state have such a high influx of people coming here. And so we have to think about strategic planning for the future. And when we do not support public transportation, what we're going to create is congestion. We're going to create more traffic fatalities on the road. And we are essentially, again, using reactive policies to try to stabilize this state. And we have to be thinking of innovative, forward thinking processes. Including bus, rapid transit, and high-speed rail, because it's not sustainable with the current influx of people moving to Texas. And we're a very young state. The average age of a Texan is 36 years old. And so these people are hopefully wanting to have kids. It's obviously very challenging in this climate with our abortion laws, but we need to make sure that we sustain for the population now and for the future. I mean, I'm sure you're aware driving on 35 is a complete chaos all the time. There's constantly construction, and they're constantly having to do construction because of the reactive policies where, okay, we need to build more because more people are coming, but the planning needs to be more innovative. And with public transportation, what this will do for future Texans is ensure that we have mobility and opportunity for them.
All right. You mentioned something called complete streets planning. What is that?
So, complete streets planning is in regards to looking at the whole scope when you're talking about not just having roads for cars, but for example, many states already use this. California is a good example. New York's a good example. There's a bunch of other states. And what they do is they use the complete street planning to also integrate public transit within the existing street. And so when I speak about public transit, I don't want people to get scared and be like, "Oh my gosh, she's going to tear up everything," and that's not what's going to happen. With complete street planning, you're able to plan public transit within the existing roadways, and so that captures reuse. Right, you're not having to build new roads or speculate new areas because they're already existing, and so when we talk about complete street planning, it's the whole picture of having the street planned in conjunction with public transit operating either within it or alongside of it. And that also includes other modes of transportation like cycling as well.
In your website section on cannabis legalization, you say generated revenue could help fund the high speed rail in Texas. Touching back on the high speed rail, in your view, how would high speed rail benefit the state's residents and its economy? And would an ideal network, or excuse me, what would an ideal network look like for you?
Yes, yeah. So cannabis revenue would uh, go towards obviously public transit and many other opportunities. But what this would look like for Texas is and we've already had this study. I'm not repeating anything that hasn't already been studied. We have studied the avenues from Dallas to Houston, Dallas to Austin, and then back. It's called the Texas Triangle. And so, what this would do and provide is the ability for someone in a rural community to have the access of public transportation to education, right, or to job training. It would also provide them transit to job opportunities. I mean, we're talking about rural areas and also maybe suburban areas, right, where students would typically have a commute. Like I think about San Antonio, for example. If someone's commuting from where I grew up, north in Spring Branch, the commute could take up to an hour, hour and a half. I mean, especially in Houston, you see that as well. And so, what we're talking about is reducing these commuter times and providing young Texans and all Texans really the opportunity to have transportation to outside of their community for education and job opportunities. And like I said, these areas have already been studied. They've been studied immensely as far as high speed rail would go. And we have the ability, we have the land, we have the opportunity to do it. We just need the leaders in place to get it going.
Now let's talk about East Texas. The issue of water rights and groundwater pumping has become hotly contested and an issue in our region. Where do you stand on this issue?
Yes, so water obviously is an essential resource and we need to protect it. I am very concerned about all of the data centers and also just all of the businesses that are trying to take up Texas water. So we would need, and I believe we already have a water fund, and so we'd want to bolster that and make sure it's strong and protected. And we also want to make sure that these companies that are coming in and trying to take our resources are held accountable and taxed appropriately for that reduction. And we also need to make sure they're protected. So this looks like stricter protections, right, all across the board. Sure. Many people in Texas are aware we have very poor environmental protections here. So we need to strengthen those so that we can sustain water for the future. A lot of my policies are more proactive because we need to think about the innovations for the future. And so um, taxing these companies appropriately and ensuring they're regulated appropriately. I mean, this is not a free for all. And I feel like it has been for the past 30 years, which is why we are having so many environmental impacts today. So higher, stricter protections and also bolstering the water fund would be essential to protect those resources.
And as president of the state Senate, how would you use your role to advocate for East Texans?
Absolutely. So I think that what I would do is I would look to the leaders and community members in East Texas. Okay. I have spent some time, I went to school at University of Houston, so I have spent some time out there. But I am not as intimately familiar, right, as those community leaders and members. And I think that part of the policy positions that we're lacking in Texas is not getting the involvement of those community leaders and members. So, and if advocating for East Texas, it'd be going out there, seeing what's going on, hearing directly from the horse's mouth, from the people, what is happening, making sure that they're able to come and testify in the state Senate directly about the impacts of their water rights or their water access, amongst other issues that are occurring in East Texas. And so I think that what it comes down to is getting your hands in the dirt, meeting with the people, listening to them, and advocating directly for their needs. My campaign, I understand that some people might be like, who is this woman? Like, who does she think she is? But, I really feel like we need to bring back the culture of the people to politics in Texas. And that's essentially what I would do, not just in East Texas, but to represent all Texans is listen to them, make sure their voices are loud and heard, and make sure I'm advocating for what they believe is in their best interest.
Is there anything else that we missed as we have been speaking back and forth, Ms. Head?
Um, I think you pretty much covered most of my policy positions. I think that what I would encourage everybody to do is check your voter registration. There's been a lot of weird stuff happening, especially here in Bexar County. There's been backlogs and stuff. So check your voter registration. Make sure you're registered to vote before February 2nd. And my other point is we as Texans, we need to be aware of the climate and the culture here. I don't think, we have three candidates for lieutenant governor, and I don't believe a traditional Democrat candidate is going to win this race, right? We need something new, we need something fresh, and we need something out of the box. And that's exactly what I plan to give the people.
All right. Well, that is all that we do have here for this interview, Ms. Head. Thank you so much for joining us here. I know you're running for lieutenant governor, and the 2026 primary elections is coming up on March the 3rd. Early voting starting February the 17th, and this wraps everything up. Is there anything else?
No, ma'am, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
All right. All right, everybody. Now we are going to go ahead and take a quick break. Thanks for watching East Texas Now.